Tasha was just like any other girl. She lived in a small neighborhood with her loving family. Her father was a quiet man who had always believed in the power of discipline. He wasn't just strict for the sake of it, he had his reasons. He believed in shaping strong characters and teaching his children the value of respect, hard work, and resilience. Tasha's mother, on the other hand, was warm and nurturing. She had a smile that could light up any room, and she always encouraged Tasha to follow her dreams, whatever they might be. At school, Tasha kept to herself. She wasn't shy, but she wasn't someone who went out of her way to make friends either. She was often seen reading, sketching in her notebook, or just staring out of the window lost in thought. To her, the world seemed big and confusing. She wasn't sure if she fit in anywhere. Some of the girls at school would whisper behind her back about her hair, her clothes, and her odd way of walking. They didn't mean to be cruel, but in middle school, people tended to judge those who didn't look or act like everyone else. Tasha's hair was thick and curly, and it was one of the things she felt most self-conscious about. It was different from the straight hair most of the other girls at school had, and she often found herself trying to make it look neater, brushing it down or tying it up in a way that she thought would make it look more like theirs. She would spend extra time in the morning, carefully styling it in a way that didn't make her feel too different. But no matter what she did, it never seemed to look just right. There was always someone who would make a comment, not out of malice, but out of their own ignorance. Tasha had learned to block out the teasing, to ignore the way people stared at her sometimes. She had learned that if she stayed quiet and kept to herself, the comments and the whispers would stop. She convinced herself that she was okay with it. After all, her family loved her. That was enough, wasn't it? But there was one thing that Tasha kept hidden from everyone at school, a secret that few knew about. She was a karate prodigy. Her father had been a karate master in his youth, and when Tasha was very young, he began teaching her the ancient art. He didn't push her too hard, though. He believed that karate was about more than just self-defense or learning how to fight. It was about respect, patience, and balance. It was about control, both of the body and the mind. Tasha loved it. From the very first day her father showed her the basics, she was hooked. It felt natural to her, like something inside her just clicked. Her movements were fluid, graceful, and strong. At home, she practiced every day, honing her skills in the backyard. There, beneath the shade of the old oak tree, Tasha would perform her forms, striking imaginary opponents with precision and focus. It was the one place where she felt completely free, where she could be herself without worrying about how others saw her. The day started like any other, with the usual morning routine. Tasha woke up early, as she always did, to get ready for school. Her mother called her down for breakfast, and she hurried downstairs, greeted by the smell of freshly made pancakes. Her dad was already sitting at the table, reading the newspaper, his usual quiet self. The morning was calm, peaceful, and uneventful. However, as soon as Tasha stepped outside, the day quickly began to feel different. It was still early, and the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over everything. But as Tasha made her way to school, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was going to happen. The air felt charged with tension, as though the world was holding its breath. She walked along the same path she always did, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her mind preoccupied with the thoughts of schoolwork and practice after class. She knew she would be working on her karate techniques again that evening. Her sensei had given her a new challenge to perfect, but her mind kept drifting back to the bullies at school. They had been getting bolder lately, picking on her more often. It wasn't just the occasional comment anymore, they had started to follow her, whispering behind her back, laughing when they thought she couldn't hear. She tried to ignore it, tried to pretend like it didn't bother her, but it did. It always did. It was hard not to feel self-conscious when you were being singled out for things you couldn't control, things like your hair, your clothes, or just the fact that you didn't quite fit in. Today, as she passed by the group of students gathered near the school gates, Tasha could already feel the eyes of the bullies on her. She didn't look at them, though. She kept her gaze straight ahead, determined to ignore them. She had learned that the best way to deal with them was to act like they didn't exist. If she didn't react, they would get bored and move on to someone else. It had worked before, and she hoped it would work again today. But today, things were different. As Tasha walked toward the entrance, one of the boys in the group, Kevin, stepped in front of her, blocking her way. He was taller than the others and often the one who led the teasing. Tasha looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest, but she didn't say anything. She just kept her head down, hoping he would let her pass. "Hey, Tasha," Kevin said, a grin spreading across his face. "What's up with your hair today? Looks like you forgot to brush it or something." Tasha felt the familiar pang of embarrassment, but she refused to let him see it. She stood still, silently hoping he would move out of her way. But Kevin wasn't done. He took a step closer, his voice louder now. "What, no retort today? You always have something to say, but now you're too shy to talk." Tasha remained silent, trying not to make eye contact. She knew it would only make it worse. Kevin smirked, enjoying the power he held over her. He turned to his friends, who were standing off to the side, watching the encounter. "Come on, guys," he said, "let's have a little fun." Before Tasha could react, one of the girls from the group, Lisa, laughed and pulled out a bottle from her bag. It was a bottle of bleach, something she must have brought just for this. The others giggled as she walked up to Tasha, holding the bottle out in front of her like it was a prize. "Hey, Tasha, let's see how your hair handles this," Lisa said, almost gleefully. Tasha's heart sank. She knew exactly what they were planning. She had heard about things like this happening to other students before, but she never thought it would happen to her. She opened her mouth to protest, but before she could say anything, Lisa tipped the bottle and began pouring the bleach onto Tasha's hair. The cold liquid soaked through her thick curls, and Tasha gasped in shock. It burned against her scalp, and the smell of bleach filled the air, making her feel dizzy. She could feel the laughter of the bullies around her, the cruel mockery in their voices. "There, now it's all clean," Kevin said sarcastically, his grin wide. "Maybe now you'll fit in better with the rest of us." The tears welled up in Tasha's eyes, but she refused to cry in front of them. She blinked quickly, trying to push the sting away, and took a deep breath. The burn of the bleach against her skin was unbearable, but the humiliation was even worse. She stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. Kevin and Lisa exchanged amused glances as they began to walk away, laughing louder now. "See you around, Tasha," Kevin called over his shoulder. "Maybe next time, don't be so weird, huh?" The others followed them, leaving Tasha standing alone, her hair drenched in bleach. The pain on her scalp was sharp, but it was the sting of their words that hurt the most. Tasha stood still for a long moment, trying to steady herself. Her body shook, but she held her ground. She was angry. She was hurt. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. She finally turned and walked toward the bathroom, the weight of the bleach heavy on her shoulders. As she entered, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was soaked, and the burn on her scalp was starting to get worse. She ran her fingers through her hair, feeling the damage it was causing. Her reflection stared back at her, her dark eyes wide with disbelief. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. "It's just hair," she whispered to herself, though it felt like more than that. It was the way they saw her, the way they had reduced her to something that could be humiliated and torn apart. But even as she felt the anger rise within her, Something inside her shifted. This wasn't who she was. She wasn't going to let them control her anymore. With newfound determination, she wiped away the tears, took off her soaked jacket, and decided she wasn't going to let this moment define her. She knew that she had something inside of her they couldn't take away. She had her strength. She had her discipline. And most importantly, she had her secret weapon, karate. She had always kept it hidden, always kept it to herself out of fear of being different. But maybe it was time to show the world who she really was. No more hiding. No more pretending. Tasha made a promise to herself then and there. Tomorrow, when she faced them again, she wouldn't be the girl they thought they could break. She would be the girl who stood up, who fought back not with violence, but with strength, courage, and the confidence she had learned through years of karate training. The world was about to see the real Tasha. But she kept it all a secret. She didn't want to be seen as different in another way, especially at school. What if the kids found out? What if they thought she was showing off? She didn't want to give anyone another reason to pick on her. So, when she went to school, she kept her karate training to herself, tucked away like a treasure that only her family knew about. Every so often, Tasha would catch a glimpse of the other kids practicing their own hobbies. Some played sports, others danced or sang. She would watch them, feeling a bit of envy, but also a sense of longing. She knew that her skills in karate were impressive, but she also knew that sharing them would make her a target. She had seen it happen to other kids before. The ones who were too good at something often ended up being the ones who were left out, the ones who were made fun of for being different. Her thoughts often wandered to the school bullies. There were a few of them, mostly boys, who were loud and brash, always acting like they were the center of attention. They liked to tease the kids they thought were weaker or less popular, and Tasha had become one of their targets. They weren't outright mean, but they had a way of picking on people. Sometimes it was the way they made fun of her hair or the way she dressed. Other times, it was the way they would follow her in the hallways, sneering at her as she walked by. It wasn't always bullying in the traditional sense. There were no punches thrown or harsh words shouted, but the constant, subtle teasing was enough to make Tasha feel uncomfortable. Despite all that, Tasha kept her head down and focused on her studies. She knew that her quiet nature and her love of karate were what set her apart, and that was okay. Or, at least, that's what she told herself. She told herself that she didn't need anyone else's approval, that as long as she had her family and her karate, she was fine. But deep down, there was a part of her that yearned to be seen for who she truly was, not just for the girl who quietly went unnoticed in the back of the class. Her moments of peace, her time in the backyard practicing karate, were the only times she truly felt free. In those moments, she could block out the world and focus on herself. Karate gave her confidence in ways she didn't fully understand. It wasn't about the physical power it gave her, though that was important. It was about the mental strength, the calmness in the face of adversity, and the belief that she could handle whatever came her way. But no matter how much she loved karate, Tasha was still a young girl, trying to find her place in the world. She wanted to fit in, to be accepted by her peers, even though she knew that it wasn't always possible. She tried to convince herself that it was fine to be different, that being herself was enough. But sometimes, when the teasing got to be too much, Tasha couldn't help but wonder if she was fooling herself. Maybe she was just too different. Maybe the world would never accept her for who she was. Little did Tasha know, her life was about to take a turn. A moment would come, soon enough, that would challenge everything she believed about herself, and it would reveal her strength in ways she could never have imagined. But for now, she remained the quiet girl with the secret, training in the backyard, trying to hold onto the belief that she didn't need the approval of others. After all, in her heart, she knew she had something they didn't: strength, discipline, and the ability to stand tall, even when the world tried to knock her down. The next day, Tasha woke up feeling different. She had spent most of the night lying awake, replaying the events of the previous day in her mind. The burn on her scalp had faded, but the sting of humiliation still lingered. She hadn't told her parents about what had happened. She didn't want to worry them or make them feel like they couldn't protect her. Instead, she had kept her emotions bottled up, forcing herself to move past it. But deep down, she knew that the moment had changed her. The events of the day before had unlocked something inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to recognize before. As she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair, Tasha's gaze lingered on the reflection staring back at her. Her hair was still damp, but there was a fierce resolve in her eyes. She knew she couldn't just sit back and let the bullies win. She couldn't let this be the thing that defined her. It wasn't just about her hair or her appearance, it was about how people treated her and how they saw her. She didn't want to be invisible anymore. For the first time, Tasha thought about her karate training in a different way. Her father had always told her that karate wasn't just about fighting. It was about discipline, respect, and knowing when to stand your ground. It was about control, not just over your body, but over your mind. He had always emphasized the importance of balance, of keeping calm in the face of challenges. He often told her, the true strength in karate comes not from how you fight, but how you choose to react. And that was what Tasha had to do now. She couldn't let the bullies control her. She had to react with strength, but with grace. After breakfast, Tasha put on her school uniform and headed out the door. Her mother gave her a warm hug as she left, unaware of the turmoil Tasha was feeling. But today, Tasha didn't feel the familiar weight of fear or anxiety as she walked to school. Today, there was something different in her step, a quiet confidence she hadn't felt before. The morning sun was shining brightly, but it wasn't just the light that made everything seem clearer. It was her mindset. When she arrived at school, the usual whispers and stares from the other students were there, but Tasha didn't pay them any attention. She walked through the halls like she owned them, her head held high. The bullies, Kevin, Lisa, and the others hadn't arrived yet, and Tasha silently promised herself that no matter what happened, she would not let them see her flinch. As the bell rang and the students flooded into the classrooms, Tasha settled into her seat. Her hands rested on her lap, and she took a deep breath. She focused on her thoughts, thinking back to the lessons her father had taught her. Stay calm. Control your mind. Control your body. She whispered those words to herself like a mantra, knowing that today was the day everything would change. Then, as the day wore on, Tasha heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. She didn't need to look up to know who they belonged to. Kevin and Lisa had arrived, and they were already in full form, laughing, talking, and making their usual remarks about people. But today, Tasha didn't feel the usual sinking feeling in her stomach. Instead, she felt a quiet fire begin to build inside of her. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. Kevin was the first one to approach her, as he always did. He leaned against her desk with that same smirk on his face, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Hey, Tasha," he said, his tone mocking. "How's your hair doing today? Still a mess?" He was waiting for her to respond, expecting her to shrink back or stammer in embarrassment. But Tasha just looked at him calmly and steadily. Without saying a word, she stood up. Kevin raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her lack of reaction. Tasha didn't look at the other students, who were now staring at the scene unfolding before them. She focused on Kevin, blocking everything else out. She wasn't going to let him see that his words had any power over her anymore. "Kevin," she said softly, her voice clear and strong. "I don't have time for your games today." She turned away from him and walked towards the door. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the classroom, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like she was walking with purpose. The whispers behind her were louder now, but Tasha didn't care. She had made her decision. After lunch, Tasha knew she couldn't just let the day go by without standing up for herself. She had learned enough from her karate lessons to know that sometimes the greatest strength was found in silence and composure. But now, she also understood that some battles had to be fought head-on, not with fists, but with courage. As the bell rang and students began to gather for the afternoon classes, Tasha made her way to the gym. The gym was mostly empty, save for a few students who were already stretching. Tasha walked to the center of the room, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her decision settling into place. She was going to do this, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small because they were different. She wanted to show them that standing up for yourself wasn't about fighting or proving anything. It was about claiming your space in the world with confidence. Just as she was about to begin practicing her forms, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, and to her surprise, Kevin was standing in the doorway, looking slightly unsure of himself. His usual swagger was gone, replaced with something else, perhaps a little guilt, or maybe just confusion. Tasha stood still, waiting for him to speak. I didn't mean to make you feel bad, Kevin said awkwardly, his voice quieter than usual. I was just messing around. You know, I didn't think it was that serious. Tasha looked at him, her expression unreadable. She could have said a lot of things. She could have told him how much his words had hurt, how much they had made her doubt herself. But instead, she just nodded. It's not about you, Kevin, she replied calmly. It's about me. I'm done letting people tell me who I should be. Kevin shifted uncomfortably, not sure how to respond. Finally, he simply muttered, I'm sorry, before turning to leave. Tasha watched him go, but she didn't feel victorious. She felt something more important, relief. The rest of the day passed quietly, but Tasha knew that things had changed. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her power. And as she walked home that afternoon, she couldn't help but smile. It wasn't because she had won or had made the bullies apologize. It was because she had finally found the strength to stand up for herself, to show the world who she truly was, and it felt amazing. As she entered her house, she was greeted by her mother's warm smile, but Tasha's thoughts were elsewhere. She was thinking about the journey ahead, the lessons she still had to learn, and the new confidence that was building inside her. She wasn't just Tasha anymore. She was someone who knew her worth and was no longer afraid to show it. The next few days were different for Tasha. It was as though something had shifted in her, and it was clear to everyone around her. At school, the usual comments and glances were still there, but Tasha no longer felt the weight of them. She had found a new sense of calm inside herself. The bullies, however, seemed to be unsure of how to react. Kevin, Lisa, and the others still tried to get under her skin, but it didn't have the same effect anymore. Tasha had become a quiet force of confidence that they couldn't easily challenge. One afternoon, after school, Tasha was walking home when she spotted Kevin and a couple of his friends hanging out by the corner of the street. They were talking in their usual loud voices, but there was something different this time. There was no teasing, no snickering, just the typical chatter. As Tasha passed by them, Kevin unexpectedly called out to her. Hey, Tasha, he said, his voice a little hesitant but louder than usual. Tasha paused, her heart rate picking up slightly. She hadn't expected this. She turned around, keeping her posture steady, her gaze calm. What's up, Kevin? She asked, her voice even and measured. Kevin shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, he started, glancing over at his friends, who were watching quietly. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For what happened before. It wasn't cool, and I shouldn't have said those things to you. There was an awkward pause before he continued, I mean, I don't really know why I acted like that. It's just. I guess I was being stupid. Tasha wasn't sure how to react. She had prepared herself for this moment, but hearing the apology still felt unexpected. She wasn't sure if it was sincere, but she could tell there was a change in Kevin. It wasn't just the apology, it was his tone, the way he spoke. It wasn't the same mocking voice he'd used in the past. "I appreciate that, Kevin," Tasha said slowly, her expression thoughtful. "It takes a lot to admit when you're wrong." She took a breath, remembering what her father had taught her about respect and understanding. She didn't want to make things more awkward than they had to be, but she also didn't want to make Kevin think it was okay to repeat his behavior. He seemed surprised by her response, but he smiled slightly. "Yeah, well, I guess I needed to hear that from you." He looked at her for a moment longer, like he was trying to figure her out. "Anyway, I'm sorry, really." Tasha nodded. "It's okay. I just don't want things like that to happen again." She didn't say more than that. There was no need to rehash everything. She had already moved past it, and now it was time to let go of the past. Kevin seemed to understand. After that encounter, things began to change even more. Kevin and his friends stopped bothering her altogether. There was no more teasing, no more sneering. They were distant, but not in a negative way, more like they had just stopped paying attention to her altogether, which in itself was a victory. It wasn't that Tasha wanted them to feel bad or uncomfortable, she just didn't want to be their target anymore. She didn't want to be made into a joke, and she certainly didn't want to hide herself away just to avoid the teasing. She had learned the hard way that standing up for herself wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. In the following weeks, Tasha felt a deeper shift within herself. Karate, which had always been a refuge for her, became an even greater source of strength. Every day after school, she would head straight to the dojo where she trained, focusing on perfecting her forms, sharpening her technique, and meditating in silence. Karate had always been about more than just self-defense. It was about balance, mental, emotional, and physical. Now, more than ever, Tasha felt the importance of that balance in her life. Her sensei noticed the change in her as well. He had been a quiet observer, offering guidance but allowing Tasha to progress at her own pace. He saw how she approached her training with renewed purpose, her movements becoming even more focused and precise. It was as though every punch, every kick, every block, was an extension of the strength she had found within herself. And her sensei, who had always believed in her potential, saw that it was finally coming to life. "Tasha," her sensei said one evening after class, as she wiped the sweat from her brow, "you've grown stronger not just in your body, but in your spirit. You are learning the true meaning of karate, not just to defend yourself, but to stand tall in the face of adversity." Tasha nodded, feeling a wave of pride wash over her. Her sensei's words resonated deeply with her. She had never realized how much her training mirrored her life until that moment. Karate had taught her to stand firm, to never back down, and to hold on to her self-respect, no matter what others threw her way. The next day, something unexpected happened. Tasha walked into school, ready to face another day, but as soon as she entered her first class, she noticed that things were different. The students in her class, many of whom had once ignored or teased her, now seemed to look at her in a new light. There was a quiet respect in their eyes, a recognition of something she hadn't seen before. And it wasn't just the students. Her teacher, Mrs. Patel, smiled at her when she walked in, a subtle acknowledgement of her strength. "Good morning, Tasha," Mrs. Patel greeted her warmly. "I heard you've been doing some amazing things outside of school." Tasha smiled back, a little surprised. "I've been keeping busy," she said, her tone light. But inside, she felt a deep sense of pride. It felt good to be recognized not just for her karate skills, but for the person she was becoming. As the day went on, she noticed how people treated her with more kindness. The whispers were still there, But now they were different. People seemed to be talking to each other, asking questions, and even complimenting her on her recent progress in karate. It was like the whole atmosphere at school had shifted. Maybe it was because they saw her in a different light now, or maybe it was because they had seen her stand up for herself and realized she wasn't someone to be underestimated. By the end of the day, Tasha felt something she had never experienced before: peace. She wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next insult or the next moment of ridicule. She had found her strength, and with it, she had found her voice. As she walked home, the sun setting behind her, Tasha felt a quiet satisfaction. The world hadn't changed all at once, but in her heart, she knew that this was just the beginning. She was no longer the girl who let others define her. She was Tasha, a young woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to stand her ground. And no matter what came her way, she would continue to walk with her head held high, strong in both body and spirit. As the weeks passed, Tasha found herself settling into a new rhythm. School was no longer a battleground for her. The bullies who once targeted her had disappeared from her thoughts. She had learned to walk through the halls with a sense of purpose, her confidence growing with each day. But it wasn't just the school that had changed. Tasha had changed too. She had become a different person in a way she couldn't quite explain. She was stronger, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. At home, Tasha's parents noticed the shift in her. They saw the way she carried herself with pride, the way her eyes seemed to shine with a new light. Her father, who had always encouraged her to be her best, was proud but not surprised. He had always known that Tasha had a special kind of strength. But her mother, with her warm and nurturing heart, couldn't help but ask, "Tasha, is everything all right? You seem different." Tasha smiled and nodded. "I'm fine, Mom. Just finding my way, I guess." She didn't need to say more. Her mother had always understood her, even when she couldn't find the words. One day, after another successful karate practice, Tasha Sensei called her over. The dojo was quieter than usual, with only a few students practicing in the corner. Tasha wiped the sweat from her forehead, ready to leave for the day, but her sensei's voice stopped her. "Tasha," he said, his tone calm but firm, "you've made great progress. I can see the change in you, not just as a student, but as a person. You've learned something important about strength, about resilience, and about believing in yourself. I'm proud of you." Tasha felt her heart swell with pride. She had always respected her sensei, and hearing his words of encouragement meant more to her than she could express. She had come a long way since she first walked into the dojo, unsure of herself, unsure of where her place in the world was. But now, she knew exactly where she stood. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Her sensei nodded. "It's your dedication that got you here. But remember, the lessons you've learned here go far beyond karate. The true challenge is in how you face the world, how you hold your ground even when things get tough." Tasha thought about those words as she left the dojo that day. Her training had taught her so much more than how to defend herself. It had taught her about life. She had learned that strength didn't come from physical power alone, it came from the ability to stay calm, to remain focused, and to believe in herself even when the world seemed against her. She was beginning to understand that real power was in her mind, her heart, and her spirit. As she walked home, she noticed the world around her in a different way. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the streets. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of distant chatter filled the air. Everything felt peaceful, almost serene. For the first time in a long time, Tasha felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. She had found her balance, her center, and nothing could take that away from her. At school, things continued to improve. Tasha's classmates began to treat her with more respect. The whispers that once followed her were now replaced by friendly nods and quiet conversations. She wasn't the girl they teased anymore. She had earned their respect, not by fighting back or making a scene, but by showing them who she really was. Her confidence radiated from her, and it was clear that the people around her had taken notice. One afternoon, as Tasha was walking to her next class, she noticed a group of students gathered in the courtyard. They were laughing and talking, but when Tasha walked by, they stopped and looked at her. It wasn't the usual sneering or judgment, it was something different. One of the girls, Jenna, stepped forward. Jenna had always been one of the more popular girls in school, the kind who rarely paid attention to the quieter students like Tasha. But today, something had changed. "Hey, Tasha," Jenna said with a smile. "I just wanted to say, you've really changed. You've always been kind of quiet, but now you've got this confidence. It's really cool." Tasha smiled, a little surprised by the compliment. "Thanks," she said, her voice steady and calm. "I guess I've just learned a lot about myself recently." Jenna nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Well, I think it's awesome. You've inspired a lot of us, actually. You've shown that you don't have to put up with people being rude or making fun of you. I think a lot of us could learn from that." Tasha didn't know what to say. She had never expected to be an inspiration to anyone. But as she looked around at the group of students who were now nodding in agreement, she realized something important. It wasn't just about standing up for herself anymore. It was about showing others that they too had the strength to stand tall and be themselves. "Thanks," Tasha said again, this time with more confidence in her voice. "That means a lot." As she walked away from the group, Tasha couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. She had found her place, her purpose, and the strength to be herself. And that was all she had ever needed. The days continued to pass, and Tasha's growth didn't stop. She continued to excel in karate, earning her black belt and becoming a source of inspiration to others in her dojo. But more than that, she continued to grow as a person. She learned that the true strength in life wasn't about physical power, but about the ability to face challenges with grace, to remain true to who you are, and to keep moving forward no matter how hard things got. Her relationship with her family deepened as well. Her parents, seeing the change in her, were proud of the young woman she was becoming. Her father, who had always encouraged her to be her best, was thrilled to see her so confident. "I always knew you had it in you," he said one evening, as they sat together after dinner. "But now, you've shown the world what you're made of." Tasha smiled, her heart full. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you and Mom." As she looked ahead to the future, Tasha felt ready for whatever came next. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her strength, and with it, she had found herself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew she would face them with the same courage, grace, and strength that had carried her this far. And that was the most powerful thing of all.